Heather Nolan was the hospital nurse who uncovered a deadly secret. Alan Mercer was the detective assigned to solve her murder. Dr. Benjamin Whitaker was the respected surgeon no one suspected, until it was too late. What began as a quiet investigation into a young woman's death spiraled into a chilling web of corruption, betrayal, and a cover-up so deep it reached the town's most trusted leaders. This is the shocking true crime story they tried to bury until the truth clawed its way to the surface. Willow Creek was the kind of town that made postcards look boring. Neatly trimmed lawns stretched in perfect rows, framed by white picket fences and blooming flower beds. The main street had a diner that served pancakes all day, a hardware store run by the same family for 3 generations, and a library where the local kids came after school to read or do homework. There hadn't been a serious crime in over a decade, just the occasional noise complaint or stolen bicycle. People here didn't just leave their doors unlocked at night. They often left them wide open while they ran quick errands. It was that kind of place. Safe, predictable, quiet. That quiet was shattered on the morning of April 12th. The call came in at 8:42 a.m. A neighbor had noticed that Heather Nolan's mail was piling up in her box and her car hadn't moved for 3 days. That wasn't like her. Heather was a nurse at the Willow Creek Medical Center. She worked long shifts but was always punctual. If she missed work, she always called. If she was late, she texted. But this time, there had been no message, no call, nothing. The neighbor, an older woman named Linda Forsythe, decided to check in. When there was no answer at the door, she peeked through the window. What she saw made her step back in horror. Heather's living room looked like a storm had hit. A table was turned over, books were scattered, and one of the lamps was broken on the floor. Linda didn't wait. She called the police. When officers arrived, they forced the door open. It was locked from the inside. That fact alone raised questions, but nothing prepared them for what they found next. Heather Nolan's body was discovered at the base of the stairs. She was lying on her back, eyes open, one arm twisted underneath her. At first glance, it looked like she might have fallen, but the bruises around her neck and the torn fabric of her shirt told a different story. This wasn't an accident. It was a murder. Word spread quickly. By lunchtime, the whole town was talking. No one could believe it. Heather was a beloved part of the community. She had grown up in Willow Creek, left for nursing school, and then returned to work in the same hospital where she'd been born. She volunteered at the local shelter, attended church regularly, and always brought cookies to the town's monthly potluck. She was the last person anyone expected to end up like this. The police launched a full investigation. Detectives combed through her house looking for clues. The front door had been locked. The back door was locked. All the windows were shut. There was no sign of forced entry. That suggested Heather had either let her killer in, or the person already had a way inside. There were no fingerprints other than Heather's on the doorknobs. No hair, no blood trails, no obvious murder weapon. The house was in disarray, but it seemed like someone had taken their time cleaning up. An autopsy confirmed the cause of death: manual strangulation. There were defensive wounds on Heather's arms, showing she had fought back. Police estimated she had died sometime between 9 p.m. and midnight on April 9th. That meant her body had been lying in the house for 3 full days before anyone found it. The investigation team interviewed her co-workers first. Everyone described Heather as kind, professional, and hard-working. Some even said she was the heart of the hospital. But a few comments hinted at tension. One nurse mentioned that Heather had been more stressed than usual in recent weeks. Another said she had overheard Heather arguing on the phone in the staff parking lot a few days before she disappeared. Still, no one could name a specific person who would want to hurt her. Her family was equally confused. Heather's parents lived 2 towns over and said they hadn't heard from her in almost a week, which wasn't unusual when she was working long shifts. She had no siblings. Her last known romantic relationship had ended almost a year earlier, and friends described it as amicable. As police dug deeper, they checked security footage from the neighborhood. A few homes had doorbell cameras, but nothing suspicious showed. No strange cars, no unknown visitors. The footage from Heather's own doorbell camera was more promising, until they discovered it had been unplugged. Whether Heather had done that herself or someone else had, no one could say for sure. Days passed, then weeks. The case grew colder, and the sense of fear in Willow Creek began to grow. People stopped walking their dogs at night. Families installed security systems. The local hardware store sold out of deadbolts and pepper spray. There was a quiet understanding that life in their perfect town had changed forever. Everyone wanted answers. How could someone be murdered in their own home with no sign of a break-in? Who would want to harm someone like Heather Nolan? And how had the killer managed to disappear without a trace? Then there was the matter of the locked doors. Investigators kept circling back to that detail. If the killer had come through the front door, how did they leave and lock it behind them? And if Heather had willingly let them in, what had made her feel safe enough to do so? Speculation ran wild. Some believed it was a stranger passing through, maybe someone hiding in town. Others whispered that it had to be someone close to Heather, someone she trusted. The idea that her killer might be someone she knew was terrifying. It meant the murderer could still be living among them, shopping in the same stores, walking the same sidewalks. Police held regular press conferences, but the updates were few. Ongoing investigation, they said. No suspects at this time. It didn't ease anyone's fears. In a place where people had once left their keys in the ignition while they ran into the store, everything now felt uncertain. Heather's funeral was held at the Willow Creek Community Church. Hundreds attended. The pastor spoke of her generosity, her dedication to helping others, and the hole her death had left behind. But there was something heavy in the air, grief, yes, but also unease. People couldn't help but look around and wonder who might be hiding something. The mystery of Heather Nolan's death hung over Willow Creek like a storm cloud. There were no easy answers, and nothing about the case made sense. All anyone knew was that something terrible had happened, and whoever had done it had left behind no trail. But the truth was still out there, waiting to be uncovered. And when it finally came to light, it would be far more disturbing than anyone in that quiet little town could have imagined. The image of Heather Nolan as the town's golden girl began to shift the deeper investigators looked into her life. On the surface, she seemed flawless, compassionate, loyal, and hard-working. But appearances can be deceiving. What started as a routine background check quickly turned into a trail of secrets no one in Willow Creek expected. It began with a shoebox, tucked away beneath Heather's bed. During a second sweep of her home, officers found it sealed with electrical tape, hidden beneath stacks of old blankets. Inside were a prepaid cell phone, several memory cards, and a stack of handwritten notes. The phone had no fingerprints other than Heather's. It wasn't listed on her phone plan, and no one in her contacts matched anyone on her regular device. It was clear. Heather had a secret life, and she had worked hard to keep it hidden. Investigators, immediately pulled the data. What they found painted a far more complex picture than anyone was prepared for. The second phone contained hundreds of text messages and call logs. Many of them were with men, some were single, others married. The tone of the messages varied, some flirtatious, others angry, even threatening. Several exchanges hinted at relationships that had become intense, toxic, and increasingly dangerous. One name popped up more than the others. Daniel M. That number called and texted Heather more than 40 times in the month before she died. But there were no last names saved. The contacts were vague, initials, emojis, and random nicknames like Doc or Big Red. It became clear that Heather had been juggling more than just her job. She was involved in relationships that crossed lines, both personal and professional. Some messages suggested she was seeing at least 2 men at once. Others indicated those men had no idea about each other. It didn't take long to begin identifying some of them. One was a married doctor at the same hospital where Heather worked. Another was a county judge. A third, to everyone's surprise, was her immediate supervisor at the clinic. Each man had motive, jealousy, fear, exposure, and each man had secrets to protect. The more detectives uncovered, the more they realized Heather may not have simply been caught in romantic drama. She had been controlling it. Several of the memory cards found in the shoebox contained audio recordings. Heather had been secretly taping her private conversations, including phone calls and face-to-face meetings. One recording caught the doctor telling her he couldn't risk being seen with her anymore. Another captured the judge angrily, warning her to be careful, or she'd ruin lives. The recordings were crystal clear. Heather had been gathering leverage. That discovery changed everything. This wasn't just a murder involving love or betrayal. Heather had been playing a dangerous game, one that could have toppled careers, destroyed families, and exposed powerful people. With each new piece of evidence, the suspect list grew longer. But identifying who had the most to lose wasn't easy. Many of the men she was involved with had airtight alibis. Some claimed they hadn't spoken to her in weeks. A few even admitted to the relationships, but swore they ended things amicably. The deeper they dug, the more investigators realized Heather had been under immense pressure. Her recent search history showed signs of fear and suspicion. She had been looking up restraining orders, private investigators, and secure data storage options. One online forum post, made under a fake username, asked if deleted voice recordings could still be recovered by police. Another post talked about fearing someone close and wanting to make sure the truth doesn't die with me. Despite the digital trail, nothing pointed to one person. Heather had cast a wide net and made a lot of enemies. Even friends began to reconsider their memories. Her best friend at work recalled Heather being unusually distant in the final weeks. She had seemed distracted, often checking her phone during conversations, sometimes slipping away to take calls in private. Once she came back from lunch with red eyes and shaky hands, but wouldn't say why. As the pressure mounted, the public perception of Heather shifted. Some began to question her character, wondering if she had brought this on herself. Others felt pity, believing she was trying to expose something bigger and had paid the price. But the evidence didn't offer clear answers. Heather was neither a villain nor a martyr. She was complex, secretive, and navigating a situation far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. What puzzled police the most was why she had recorded so much. Was it to protect herself or to use as blackmail? Several files had been labeled with specific names and dates, almost like evidence logs. That pointed to intention. She knew what she was doing. But if she was planning to release the information, she never got the chance. Among the final recordings, investigators found something even more chilling. It was dated 3 days before her death. In the recording, Heather's voice was calm but tense. She said she believed someone had been following her, that she'd noticed a car parked near her house more than once. She didn't name anyone, but her final words on the recording were unforgettable. "If anything happens to me, don't let them get away with it." That one sentence changed the tone of the case entirely. Heather had seen something or someone that made her fear for her life. And yet she didn't run. She didn't leave town. She stayed. Why? Investigators believed the answer might be in the final texts she sent on the secret phone, but the last 3 messages had been deleted. Only timestamps remained, all within an hour of her estimated time of death. What happened in that hour remained a mystery. Had she called someone to come over? Had they forced their way in and cleaned up after? No fingerprints, no forced entry, no weapon. Just Heather, her secrets, and a digital trail leading nowhere. As investigators continued to unravel her life, one thing became certain. Heather Nolan had been living on the edge of something far bigger than anyone in Willow Creek had realized. Whether she was trying to blow the whistle, protect herself, or manipulate those around her, the result was the same. Someone had made sure her story ended before she could tell it, and the deeper they looked, the more dangerous the truth became. 3 weeks after Heather Nolan's funeral, the investigation into her murder had stalled. Leads had grown cold. The public's interest, once burning hot, began to fade into quiet frustration. Heather's family was still grieving, and the people of Willow Creek had returned to a nervous version of normal. But behind the scenes, detectives were still combing. Through phone records, surveillance footage, and every detail from Heather's hidden recordings, nothing was sticking. Then, on a gray Monday morning, everything changed with the arrival of an envelope. It showed up without warning, no return address, no postage mark, and no indication of who had delivered it. It was found on the police chief's desk, resting squarely at the center, as if someone had placed it there intentionally. There was no sign of forced entry into the building. No one remembered seeing a visitor that morning. The envelope was plain, sealed, and inside was a single sheet of paper with 10 typed words. Heather knew too much. She was never supposed to talk. The note wasn't signed. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no trace evidence at all. It had been prepared carefully, deliberately. Someone wanted to send a message, and not just any message, but one that confirmed what detectives had started to believe. Heather's murder wasn't random. It wasn't a lover's quarrel or a spur-of-the-moment crime. It was a targeted, calculated decision to silence her. But that wasn't all. Also inside the envelope was a glossy printed photograph. It showed Heather standing in the hospital parking lot, mid-argument with a man. The photo had been taken from a distance, possibly through a window or with a zoom lens. Heather's face was clearly visible, angry, defensive. The man's face, however, was blurred. Whether the blur was intentional or the result of poor resolution wasn't clear, but behind him was a clue detectives had been waiting for. An old, red pickup truck with a missing left tail light. It was the first solid lead in weeks. Detectives pulled traffic camera footage and license plate reader data. They cross-referenced red pickup trucks in the county registry and found one match. A 1997 Ford F-150 registered to a man named Travis Colton. Travis was a 41-year-old mechanic who lived on the edge of town. He had no criminal record and very few public interactions, no social media, no major debts, and no connection to Heather that the police could immediately find. But that didn't mean there wasn't one. Detectives visited his address the next day. His home was a modest, single-story structure, a detached garage filled with old tools and car parts. His truck was gone. His mailbox was overflowing. Neighbors said they hadn't seen him in over a week. The front door was unlocked, and inside the house, police found signs of a quick departure: laundry half done, dishes in the sink, a half-eaten sandwich still on the counter. His wallet and phone were missing. The most chilling discovery was in the garage: a hospital visitor badge with Heather Nolan's name handwritten across the bottom. That was enough to issue a warrant. A deeper search of Travis Colton's home revealed more connections. In a shoebox beneath a loose floorboard, detectives found several folded notes, printouts of emails that referenced Heather by name. One email, sent from an encrypted account, included an attached image of Heather's house with a timestamp from the night she was killed. The sender's identity was hidden, but the message beneath it read, "She's going to talk. You know what needs to be done." Still, without Travis, there were more questions than answers. Was he the killer? A lookout? A pawn in someone else's plan? And most importantly, where was he now? The entire state was put on alert. A BOLO, be on the lookout, alert was issued for the red truck, and every rest stop, highway patrol officer, and border crossing received his photo. But weeks passed, and Travis Colton remained a ghost. Then, something strange happened. The police station's evidence room was broken into. The crime was discovered during a routine inventory check. Only one item was missing: Heather's second phone, the one filled with private messages and recordings, the device that had become the heart of the investigation. Strangely, the evidence locker itself hadn't been forced open. The access logs showed no irregularities. It looked on paper like nothing had happened, but the phone was gone. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone with knowledge of the investigation and access to secure areas had removed it. Panic set in among the lead investigators. That phone held recordings implicating at least 2 public officials, possibly more. And now, it had disappeared. As the internal investigation launched, the public was told only that evidence had been compromised. The lead detective on the case, Alan Mercer, assured reporters that backup copies existed, and the investigation would continue as planned. What he didn't mention was that no one could access the backups. Heather had encrypted everything using a passcode that still hadn't been cracked. Then came the breakthrough. Desperate to regain momentum, the department devised a trap. They created a fake voicemail message, supposedly from a new witness who claimed to have video footage of Heather and Travis Colton together the week before she was murdered. The voicemail was carefully worded and designed to appear real. It was quietly leaked to select individuals known to have been close to the case, including one of the men identified from Heather's secret phone. 3 nights later, someone broke into the home of the witness, an undercover officer living in a rented property on the edge of town. The suspect entered through the back window. He moved swiftly, bypassing the kitchen, going straight to the upstairs office. As he rifled through drawers, 2 plainclothes officers emerged from a closet and restrained him before he could escape. He wasn't wearing a mask. He wasn't carrying a weapon. And he wasn't Travis Colton. It was Detective Alan Mercer, The very man leading the investigation. The arrest stunned the entire department. Mercer had spent weeks speaking to the press, organizing searches, and comforting Heather's parents. And now he was in handcuffs, caught trying to silence a witness that didn't even exist. His involvement opened the floodgates. With a search warrant, his home and office were turned upside down. And what they found inside would finally reveal just how deep this conspiracy went. The contents of Detective Alan Mercer's home were more than just shocking. They unraveled the very foundation of the investigation itself. From the moment officers began their search, it became clear Mercer had been living a double life. In his basement, hidden behind a false wall, was a makeshift office. A desk covered in manila folders, USB drives, burned DVDs, and scribbled notes lined the small, windowless space. On the far wall was a large corkboard, crammed with printed photographs, maps, and names connected by red string. At the center of it all was a single photograph of Heather Nolan. Her face had been circled in red ink multiple times. One of the first items seized was a locked briefcase discovered beneath the desk. Inside, investigators found dozens of printed emails, each one containing correspondence between Mercer and at least 3 anonymous accounts. These emails hinted at transactions, instructions, and veiled threats. One message stood out. "She's close. If she opens her mouth, it won't just be me." It was dated 2 days before Heather's death. More troubling was a black USB drive, labeled simply with the word insurance. It contained a collection of audio files, unedited versions of Heather's secret recordings. Some had been enhanced or altered to remove background noise, indicating someone had been analyzing the files. Among them was a never-before-heard clip that changed the direction of the case entirely. In it, Heather could be heard telling someone she planned to meet with a journalist from a regional paper. She said she had names, recordings, and documents that would expose a chain of corruption stretching beyond Willow Creek. The person she was speaking to was silent throughout the conversation, but a faint cough, later matched to Mercer through previous recordings, identified him without doubt. Heather had confided in the man who ultimately led the investigation into her murder. But that wasn't all the USB held. There were surveillance videos, many taken without knowledge or consent. Footage from hidden cameras inside Heather's home and vehicle showed she had been watched for weeks. One clip, dated 3 days before her death, revealed Mercer sitting in an unmarked car outside her house, watching as she closed her front door. He made no attempt to approach her. He just sat, waited, and eventually drove off. More damning than the surveillance was the discovery of Heather's missing second phone. It was hidden in a heat-sealed pouch behind a stack of insulation. Forensics confirmed it had not been accessed since the night of the evidence room break-in. And the kicker, fingerprints on the pouch, belonged not only to Mercer, but also to an unexpected third party, Travis Colton. It was the confirmation police needed. They now had a clear picture forming. Mercer had used his authority to steer the eye. Investigation away from himself while simultaneously erasing evidence and silencing threats. But his connection to Travis was still uncertain. How did a local mechanic become entangled in a conspiracy involving law enforcement and potentially higher-level officials? That question was answered 3 days later when a traffic camera spotted Travis's red pickup truck over 400 miles away, abandoned on the shoulder of a remote mountain road. Inside the truck was a blood-stained jacket, a burner phone, and a crumpled motel receipt dated the night of Heather's murder. DNA on the blood matched Travis, but it wasn't fatal. No body was found nearby, and there was no indication he had died. It looked like an attempt to fake his own death or disappear without a trace. And once again, the investigation hit a wall. But Mercer's arrest opened doors. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he agreed to a partial confession in exchange for leniency. What he revealed pulled back the curtain on a network of quiet corruption. According to Mercer, Heather Nolan had accidentally discovered an illegal prescription drug ring operating out of the Willow Creek Medical Center. Doctors were writing scripts for medications in fake names, then selling the drugs through intermediaries. The money was laundered through local businesses, including a real estate firm, a law office, and even a church. The entire operation had remained hidden for years, until Heather, working late one night, found a set of duplicate patient files stored under a forgotten username. Rather than report the discovery immediately, she began collecting evidence. She recorded phone calls, saved documents, and compiled a list of names. Mercer claimed he first became aware of Heather's knowledge when she approached a mutual contact, one of the hospital's board members, about what she had found. That board member, fearing exposure, reached out to Mercer for help. His job was to scare Heather into silence, but according to him, she refused to back down. When intimidation failed, someone made the call to end it permanently. Mercer insisted he hadn't killed Heather himself. He said that responsibility belonged to Travis Colton, a former patient and ex-convict who had once worked off the books for a doctor involved in the scheme. Travis, desperate for money and already connected to the hospital through backdoor jobs, was the perfect candidate to carry out the threat. Mercer claimed he arranged for Travis to enter Heather's home using a key provided by an inside contact, likely one of the doctors she had dated. After the murder, Mercer said his job was to keep the investigation under control, make sure nothing led back to the conspiracy, and eliminate any remaining threats, including the evidence in the police department's own locker. Despite his confession, Mercer's story raised new questions. If he didn't kill Heather, why did his fingerprints appear on so much of the evidence? Why had he kept her phone? Why spy on her for weeks if she had already been marked for death? Investigators believed he was lying about the extent of his involvement. It was clear Mercer wasn't just a cleanup man. He had been deeply involved in orchestrating events, manipulating players, and staying one step ahead of the truth. With Mercer in custody and Travis still missing, the case became larger than anyone had imagined. Federal agents were called in to review financial records and medical billing histories. Subpoenas were issued. Several doctors resigned. The hospital's board was dissolved. And quietly, one by one, more arrests followed. But even as justice loomed, the most disturbing detail lingered. On one of Heather's final recordings, buried in the background beneath her nervous voice, a second voice whispered a name. It wasn't Mercer. It wasn't Travis. It was someone not yet on the radar, someone she seemed truly afraid of. That name was about to change everything again. The name whispered in the background of Heather Nolan's final recording was almost missed. It came 17 minutes into the file, softly spoken while Heather typed on her laptop and mumbled about compiling her evidence. The voice didn't match any known recordings of Detective Alan Mercer or Travis Colton. It was deeper, more deliberate. And the name it spoke, Whitaker, sent a chill through the investigation team. That name belonged to Dr. Benjamin Whitaker, chief of surgery at Willow Creek Medical Center. A respected physician, public speaker, and philanthropist, Whitaker had long been considered a pillar of the community. He served on several hospital boards and had chaired health policy committees. At the state level, he was also Heather's former mentor. At first glance, there was no obvious connection between Whitaker and the events surrounding Heather's death. He had an airtight alibi for the night she was killed. He had been out of state, attending a medical ethics conference. But when investigators reviewed Heather's private files, they found something that forced them to take a closer look. Tucked inside a password-protected folder on her laptop was a PDF labeled BW Personal. It contained detailed notes Heather had made during her last 3 months at the hospital. The notes referenced unusual billing practices and patient records that bore Whitaker's initials. In one entry, she wrote that she could no longer trust the person she once admired the most. She never named him directly, but she didn't have to. The implication was clear. The audio clip, paired with Heather's journal and Mercer's confession, painted a disturbing picture. Dr. Whitaker hadn't just known about the illegal prescription scheme. He may have been orchestrating it. Investigators subpoenaed hospital records spanning the past 5 years. What they uncovered was a sophisticated operation. Dozens of phantom patients had been created using stolen identities or false information. These fake files allowed doctors to request prescriptions under legitimate credentials, which were then filled at cooperating pharmacies. The medications, primarily opioids, were redirected into black market networks that stretched far beyond Willow Creek. The profits were laundered through shell corporations, and all signs pointed to someone at the top coordinating the movement. Dr. Whitaker was suddenly no longer a respected surgeon. He was a suspect. Agents quietly seized his office computer and financial documents. A review of his personal email accounts revealed encrypted messages with several aliases already tied to the investigation. One email, decrypted with the help of cybersecurity experts, included an attachment, a surveillance photo of Heather Nolan leaving the hospital late at night. Beneath the image were the words, "She knows. Mercer is handling it." That line confirmed everything. Whitaker wasn't just aware of Heather's investigation. He had authorized her silencing. Yet when confronted, Dr. Whitaker denied all involvement. He claimed someone had hacked his email and framed him. His legal team immediately filed for a temporary injunction to stop the release of the evidence. Meanwhile, federal agents moved quickly, concerned he might flee the country. When a search of his home turned up a hidden safe containing $150,000 in cash, a second passport, and a burner phone, authorities had enough to arrest him. The town was stunned. Headlines exploded. The doctor behind the murder, Willow Creek's darkest secret, the fall of a community leader. The media swarmed the quiet streets that had once seemed so peaceful. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the Ida case was far from over. During questioning, Whitaker finally spoke. Calm, poised, and without remorse, he admitted that Heather had been a problem. She had grown too curious, too bold, but he maintained that he never explicitly ordered her death. He blamed Mercer for escalating the situation and claimed Travis Colton had acted out of desperation and greed, not on Whitaker's instruction. But the facts told a different story. As the investigation deepened, it became clear Whitaker had been pulling strings for years. He had quietly funded political campaigns, silenced whistleblowers with legal threats, and paid off hospital staff to look the other way. Mercer had been just one of many who received envelopes of cash in return for silence and compliance. Most haunting of all was a folder found on Whitaker's backup hard drive, labeled Contingency. Inside were files on over a dozen individuals, doctors, nurses, administrators, who had either suspected or questioned the hospital's internal practices. Several had left the medical center abruptly over the past decade. One had died in a car crash under suspicious circumstances. Another had reportedly taken her own life after being fired. It was as if Whitaker had kept a personal ledger of threats to his empire, ready to take action when necessary. Heather Nolan's name was at the top of the list. She had come too close. She wasn't just a curious nurse. She was prepared, smart, and determined. And that made her the most dangerous person in Whitaker's world. The trial began nearly a year after her death. By then, Detective Alan Mercer had agreed to testify against Whitaker in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony was brutal and specific. He described meetings in parking garages, envelopes of cash passed in silence, instructions to monitor Heather's activities, and the night he received the call that she had been taken care of. Travis Colton, however, was still missing. Rumors swirled. Some claimed he had crossed the border, others believed he had been killed to protect the operation. His disappearance became one of the few loose threads in an otherwise ironclad case. In court, the prosecution presented everything: the recordings, the emails, the surveillance photos, and Heather's journal. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning a verdict: guilty on all counts. Dr. Benjamin Whitaker was sentenced to life in federal prison with no possibility of parole. At the sentencing hearing, Heather's mother read a letter her daughter had written 2 weeks before her death, intended for a journalist she never got the chance to meet. In it, Heather had written, "If something happens to me, please tell people I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I was just trying to do the right thing. I wanted to believe the truth would matter." And in the end, it did. Heather Nolan's murder was more than a tragedy. It exposed a corrupt system hiding in plain sight. It forced a town to reckon with how easily power can be abused and how fragile justice can be. But it also reminded people that one voice, when determined enough, can bring even the most powerful to their knees. Her case became a symbol across the country of courage, of consequence, and of the hidden darkness that can exist behind the most perfect facades. Willow Creek would never be the same again. And neither would the people who had once believed something like this could never happen in a town like theirs.